Hello, everyone. Welcome to our live recording of What It Takes with Solstice co-founder and CEO Steph Speirs. I'm Emily Kirsch. While people are joining, I want to let you know that we've enabled the chat so that as you're hearing what Steph shares, you can post your favorite quotes or respond to her story and journey. So please feel free to do that as we go. And I am so excited to start this episode of What It Takes with our sponsor of this live episode, our friends over at Nextracker. I'm really excited to introduce Kristen Kirsch, a close friend of Powerhouse and a close friend of mine. No relation, but we are basically family. So over to you, Kristen.
Hi. Wow. So I'm Kristen Kirsch. I'm VP of Marketing at Nextracker. We design and manufacture smart solar tracker systems and software for utility scale ground mount applications around the world. We have reached 40 gigawatts of projects either under construction or installed and operate in 30 countries. But enough about us. On behalf of Nextracker, I'm super pleased to be sponsored today's What It Takes episode with Steph Speirs of Solstice, excuse me. We chose this particular interview because we share common values, making solar affordable for all and expanding the benefits of solar to underserved communities or to those who just thought it was out of their range or out of their means. So now for us, we're starting to see a lot more community solar projects with commercial and industrial technologies. Which is super exciting. For me, what Solstice is enabling is the democratization, I love to say that word, I actually got it out, democratization of renewable energy. So with fractional ownership, Solstice is reaching a broader consumer segment and educating that it can be affordable and that you can be an owner in it. So now consumers in DC, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, can get direct benefit of solar because they can now be part owner. And that's for us a pretty powerful message that Solstice is delivering on. So bravo. So now in these times, Nextracker has been taking a serious look and turning inward as of late and dedicating more leadership and brain and heart power to diversity and inclusion, which is another area that Steph and the Solstice team have long held as core truths in their business. So I really wanted to mention that and take a second. So again, thanks for your work, Steph and Solstice team. We look forward to your continued growth. And Emily and Powerhouse as well. Huge fan, I'm Emily Kirsch fan club. So I've long been a listener. So enjoy the show.
Thanks, Kristen. Thank you to my fellow Kirsch. Really appreciate you and Nextracker for all your support over the years. This is not the first time you've backed something that Powerhouse has done, so thank you. Welcome to Powerhouse and welcome to What It Takes. I'm Emily Kirsch, founder and CEO of Powerhouse and founder and managing partner of Powerhouse Ventures. For those of you who are new to Powerhouse, we are an innovation firm and venture fund. We help corporations and investors tap into cutting edge startups so that together we can build the next century of clean technology innovation. I am so thrilled to welcome Steph Speirs, co-founder and CEO of Solstice, to What It Takes. Steph, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you to Nextracker and thanks to you.
Of course. Thanks for coming. I am particularly excited to interview you tonight because right now on the show for the first time, Powerhouse Ventures is very proud to announce that we have invested in your latest round alongside our friends at Schneider Electric Ventures and Total Carbon Neutrality Ventures, along with many more to be announced in the next week or so. So congratulations on the round and thank you for allowing us to participate.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for being a part of it. We feel so lucky to have amazing investors and yourself and Powerhouse included.
Thank you. All right, so going back to the beginning of your life, you were born in Honolulu, Hawaii, where you were raised by a single immigrant mother. After immigrating from Korea, your mom raised you and your two siblings on a minimum wage union worker salary. You went to public school up until high school, and in high school you got a scholarship, to attend a private high school in Honolulu, where you were class president, newspaper editor, senior prefect, top student of the class in 2003, and a National Merit Scholar. So aside from being incredibly impressive, what were you like as a kid, and what were you and your family like?
Yeah, I feel like I should tell high school me to relax a little bit. And my some context: my sister started reading when she was 2. She went to college when she was 13, and so in a lot of ways, just striving was normalized. And it was also because of the way that I grew up. My mom was an immigrant, like you said, and when you earn minimum wage, unfortunately, in this country, you cannot support a family on just that. And minimum wage actually increased in 2007 and 2008 and 2009 by about $1 each time. And it's been stuck there for the last 11 years at $7.25 an hour. And so watching the most incredible human, the most talented person, my mom, just struggle to make it, not because she didn't have the talent, but because she didn't have the opportunity, was really formative and had a profound impact on my life. And one thing, though, if you're, getting evicted and homeless, if not for family members that have spare bedrooms, and you mentioned I was a scholarship kid. I was the scholarship kid at my high school who served other kids lunch during lunch hour. And so if you kind of watch your family member that you love, that could be a better CEO than I could be, struggle so much for things that are outside of her control, like her accent, then I think you begin to realize that there's reasons why some people have privilege and other people don't. And those reasons are not always fair. It's often the birth lottery or where you were born in terms of geography. And so my mom taught us one thing that I've carried throughout my entire life, which is that wealth is not about how much money you have. It's about the things that you have that no one can take away from you, even if you fall on hard times. And so she taught us to study a lot and taught us that everything could be possible if we worked really hard and we took nothing for granted. So having my sister, my brother, and my mom's example was a huge reason why I think the last thing that I would mention there is that, that list of accomplishments, sometimes people will attribute that to me, but it's not me. It's Isaac Newton has a quote that said, "If I have seen further, it's because I stood on the shoulders of giants." And so that says more about my mom's sacrifice than what I accomplished.
I feel like we could stop the interview and everyone would know everything they need to know about you just based on that one answer, but we should keep going. Speaking of hard work, you received, and the support of all the people in your life, you received essentially a full scholarship to go to Yale, where you earned an MBA in history and international studies, and later earned a master's in public affairs, in development economics and international development from Princeton. And then later in your career, you got an MBA from MIT. So I'm curious, what was it like growing up, as you described, just above the poverty line as a first-generation immigrant? And then what was it like to go on to study at Yale and Princeton and MIT? And also curious, what made you focus on international development?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Hawaii, as you mentioned, and Hawaii is the most isolated landmass in the world, I believe. And it is, when you don't really have money to travel, you kind of dream of the world and seeing more. And so that's what led me to study international development. Also, as the child of immigrants, there's, our story of this country is a story built on immigrants and the hard work that they put into this country and their contributions as well. If you're not Indigenous, then you're an immigrant too. And so really wanted to understand how to bring more countries into prosperity. And when I was at Yale, there was not a single day in which I looked around and didn't feel so lucky to be there. I think the theme of my life is that I have felt very lucky to be wherever I am. And that's not to say that, I don't think I didn't work hard to get there, but there's so many people who don't have that opportunity. And so I, at first, didn't know what to do with that privilege. I don't know why I get to be in these elite rooms, but my mom doesn't get to, or other folks who who want to be in that room too don't get a seat at the table. And I realized that the role of power and privilege is to use it to open up the doors for other folks to access that same sort of power. And it's a purpose that's driven me throughout my whole life. If you have your 2 feet in 2 different worlds, one that's the have-nots and ones that are full of the haves, then you begin to see that there's not that much that separates those 2 worlds and those 2 types of people other than opportunity and chance.
Really well said. After graduating in 2007 from Princeton at the age of 22, you joined the first Obama campaign, where you started as a field organizer in 7 pivotal primary states. And then at the senior age of 23, you served as deputy field director at Obama for America in Ohio for the general election. So at 23 years old, you led a team of 150 people. And you told me that you worked 521 days straight without a day off. So tell me, what was the campaign like, and what did you learn from your time on the campaign?
I mean, I wasn't the only one that did that. It was a whole network of people who came together. Many people who had never been politically active in their entire life. And, I was working in very rural areas across the country, living out of my car, and just being astounded that no matter where I went, I found people who were just like me and who really wanted the same things in life. People just wanted to take care of their loved ones. They wanted a shot at a good job. They wanted to, be able to achieve their goals if they worked hard enough. And people wanted to believe that we were going to progress in some way. And so what connected people all across the country was common. And I also witnessed people sacrifice so much for the things that they believed in. I watched a woman, one of my super volunteers, she had Parkinson's, so she couldn't go door to door, and she would just sit there hours writing postcards to her neighbors, asking them to consider voting for Barack Obama. And so watching ordinary people come together, and only when they came together could do extraordinary things, the very improbable thing of electing Barack Obama as president. That was the best lesson straight out of college that anyone could ever have. And that's the best job I'll probably never get to do again as a field organizer, going door to door for 12 hours a day. But what an inspirational example for the rest of my life to strive for.
Did you think he would win?
No, I did not. I knew that I wanted to work for Barack Obama because I wanted to try to help him win. But you have to remember, at the time in 2006 and 2007, Hillary Clinton was just assumed to be the Democratic nominee. And so the people that worked on the Obama campaign, none of the people who started in early states really were in it for any political glory. They just wanted to help him. And they believed in the vision that he had for America, which is that I am my brother's keeper, I am my sister's keeper, and there's we can build a government based on solidarity and taking care of each other rather than pitting us against each other.
After Obama was elected president in 2009, you helped develop Middle East policy as a special assistant in the Department of Homeland Security. And then in 2010, you were hired at the White House as a special assistant to the head of Middle East policy. And in 2011, you were promoted to the director of Yemen policy, which made you the youngest policy director at the National Security Council. All of this was happening around the time of the Arab Spring. What were these roles like, and what did you learn?
Yeah, my first job in the White House was a special assistant in the Middle East office. So my job was to answer the phone, get my boss lunch, and make sure foreign nationals didn't steal things. Special assistant means a lot of things in DC, but sometimes it means that. And thanks to he was really empowering. And I spent a year before the Arab Spring broke out begging for more work and begging to help people. And I try to approach it with, how can I contribute, rather than what I wanted or deserved. And people were so busy, they needed help, and so they started giving me little bits of projects. And then the Arab Spring happened, and there was more work than time to do it in. And my very kind boss asked if I wanted to take over the Yemen portfolio. And at the time we were trying to get a dictator out of power, to try to get a government in place that was responsive to the people rather than the elite. And it's obviously a really hard situation in Yemen still. We didn't fix it, but we figured out that we could give more money to humanitarian and democratic transitions as opposed to primarily, military and counterterrorism funding. And so working towards that was an incredible opportunity to see a once in a generation democratic transition and what can go wrong and how we need to be better to ensure that governments do represent the people they're supposed to serve.
After your time in the Obama administration, and then after a few months of leading Get Out the Vote efforts for the Obama 2012 campaign, you moved to Pakistan as a summer associate with the nonprofit impact investing fund Acumen, and then later moved to India to work with one of Acumen's portfolio companies called D-Light, providing energy access via solar. And so you started Solstice right after graduating from Princeton, and then you continued to work on it while you lived in India. You were working remotely on Solstice day and night, managing those two schedules. So how were you balancing your time doing this work full time with Acumen and with D-Light and starting Solstice? And then how did your time in Pakistan and India influence what Solstice eventually became?
Yeah, I was not doing two full-time jobs on purpose. I had committed to working in D-Light for a year, right as my co-founders and I were starting Solstice, and wanted to live up to my commitment. And so that meant working from 9 to 6 in India on the normal day job of trying to get solar lanterns to more folks who live off the grid. And then when work let out at 6 p.m., working the East Coast hours, which is 6 p.m. India time is 9 a.m. East Coast time. And the only reason I was able to do it is because I had amazing co-founders who were back in the US doing a lot of the on-the-ground work, and I was joining calls remotely, and and we were able to kind of push the idea forward in that year still. And a lot of that time was just knowing that we had to focus on getting more people access to clean energy. So I was halfway across the world, looking for more renewable energy opportunities to invest in, and then working on these microgrids and solar lanterns in India. But back home in America, so many people couldn't get access to clean energy. And so that was like a homing beacon to continue the work, even when it was a little bit tiring.
I can imagine. So after D-Light, you went to MIT where you met your co-founder, Sandhya Murali. And then in 2017, you received an MBA, and that's when you started Solstice. So I'm curious, tell me more about the journey of this time focused on energy access abroad, but then recognizing the need for the opportunity here in the US. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, a big reason why I wanted to work on renewables is because of my time in the Middle East. We'd be driving through Yemen in armored vehicles, and we'd look out the window and we'd see people lined up waiting for fuel, but we were spending our whole day on counterterrorism and military issues. And then when I moved to India and Pakistan, I thought, yes, this is an area of the world where a massive number of people don't have access to the grid. And this is where I can do the most good. And then there was the realization that back home, people didn't have access. Even in the most prosperous nation in the world, very few people had access to clean energy. And so coming back home and working with Sandhya to build Solstice was a realization that sometimes to have the most impact, we should start in our backyards. And I remain incredibly grateful every day that I get to work with Sandhya. She's also an incredible woman leader in energy, and really runs so much about Solstice. And so I want to give her credit for building the company as well.
I'm curious, oftentimes I think we feel like, personally, I felt like when I was starting Powerhouse, I felt like I needed an MBA. I was like, how can I start a company if I don't have an MBA? I won't know what to do. I did not get an MBA, but I'm curious, how do you feel about having an MBA now that you have one?
Yeah, I also felt that way. I felt like I was coming from government and politics, and I needed business credibility. Little did I know that in the startup world, that they don't consider an MBA business credibility. and little did I know that oftentimes an MBA feels like getting a master's in confidence. But I owe so much to my MBA. I mean, I met my co-founder in business school. Some of my first funders were my classmates at business school, and the Entrepreneurship Center at MIT housed us and gave us an office for 2 years. And so Solstice would not exist if it had not been for business school. But at the same time, I wouldn't have been able to go to business school had I not gotten a scholarship to go. And it is a very expensive proposition. And so it's not for everyone. But I don't think anyone needs an MBA, but it's okay if folks want an MBA.
So you mentioned some of the capital that you raised early on came from your own classmates. So you started Solstice during your MBA. What made you make the leap? There's one thing to say, oh, I have this idea based on these experiences that I've had abroad. It's another thing to say, I'm going to make the leap and start this company. So how did you make the leap? And then where did that first $600K that you raised come from? Yeah,
I think part of the reason why I went to business school was because I was afraid to fail. And in some ways, MBA was a safe backup plan if things didn't work out. And then I was kind of doing both, the full-time MBA and the full-time Solstice job. And I realized that if you are doing two things at 70%, you feel like you're going 140% over your capacity, but you're probably getting a C at life. And so I realized that this comes down to commitment, that startups statistically will fail even if you put 100% into it. And if you don't put everything into it, if you don't put your all into it, if you don't dive headfirst into a startup, then you are dooming it to fail, because there's no way it survives with anything less than 100+ effort. And so that kind of realization about commitment made me realize that I had to I was going to forego a lot of the most fun things about business school, which is the networking and the connections and going out with people and learning up from other people, and focus entirely on Solstice. And in doing so, I think my classmates were incredibly supportive. In business school, you are given a team of 6 people to do all of your assignments with. And 2 of those folks, Dennis and Rodrigo, were my first 2 funders when we first were raising. And they handed me a check at a class event. And Dennis said, you have to be better at asking for money. You shouldn't just be forced to take a check at a social engagement that I tracked you down at. And so I think it was because I was so afraid of asking my friends or my connections or anyone I really respected. I was really scared to ask them for money because I didn't want to lose it. I didn't want to disappoint them. I didn't want to ruin the relationship. And then it's that commitment. Like, if you don't give it your all, you will fail. And so, figuring out that if we had any choice of making solar more accessible to people, I had to get over my fears about money that stemmed from my childhood. And I had to remember that I should not let my fear of money get in the way of the liberation of people who are marginalized and who don't have things that they deserve. So that's what got me over it.
Were you paying yourselves early on?
No, we were not paying ourselves for the first few years. And then just recently, we graduated to a pretty marginal salary, and we're still paying ourselves below market. But my co-founder and I feel a deep responsibility that we shouldn't increase our own compensation unless we can increase the whole team's kind of commensurately. So that's been our philosophy for the past few years. And this is not like a Jeff Bezos situation where one person's wealth grows and grows, but everyone else stays the same. We're gonna kind of lift everyone together.
In 2018, you raised a seed round, and then you just closed this twice oversubscribed note round, which Powerhouse Ventures and Schneider Electric Ventures and Total Carbon Neutrality Ventures are all very proud and happy to have invested in, along with a few others who will be announced soon. What have you learned about fundraising, and what advice would you give to entrepreneurs that are at the pre-seed and seed stage and just getting started?
Oh man, I've learned so much about fundraising, and I want to share all of what I've learned, especially with marginalized populations that have harder access, harder time accessing capital.
Mm-hmm.
And so, a couple things. One is that in fundraising, the people who teach fundraising, they'll teach you about the pitch, and the pitch is really important. And knowing how to showcase your business model and your traction is really important. But it's only 50% of it. I think the other 50% is the process, and it's a craft that's learnable, but it's very tactical. And so, for example, no one ever teaches you this is your CRM for tracking investors, and this is how you follow up. And no one ever says you have to. This is what makes a perfect data room for your investors doing due diligence. And these are the 3 types of pitch decks, and the 2 types of financial models you need before you even step outside the door and talk to an investor. And one thing I wish all younger or early stage entrepreneurs stop doing was asking everyone around them, do you know of an investor that can invest in my business? Because that's, I don't think, the most effective way to phrase that question. The recipient who hears that question will just think, let me think about it and get back to you. And more likely than not, they're not going to be able to come up with a list. What we should all do is do our homework, come up with our target top 25 investors, and take that piece of paper with you to every single meeting you go to and show that list to investors or super connectors and say, is this the right list? Do you know anyone on this list? Am I missing anyone on this list? And by doing a little bit of homework on the front end, you invite responses. You give people less of a burden on themselves to think of the answers, and you give them something to reflect on. And I think that's so much more effective. And so there are little tactical things like that I wish we were all taught. And then also the last thing I'll say is that there's kind of a perverse characteristic of fundraising that you are more likely to get funding if people feel FOMO. Like if they feel like your round is scarce or closing, then you'll have much more funder interest than at the beginning. And so one thing I want folks, especially founders of color, to know is that really think about who are the first people that you're getting in the door, the first investors you're getting in the door, because they'll set the tone for the rest of your round. And you're going to get married to them. Fundraising's like dating, and you should vet them as such, because these are going to be partners with you for the rest of your business, if not your life. And we feel really lucky, having gone through that process, to have the investors we have, including now you.
Very grateful to be a part of Solstice in this way. And you've taken that capital and you've worked on 26 community solar projects. In the early days, what did you do with this capital? How did you build your product? How did you get your first customers?
Yeah, in our early days, our focus was just on trying to talk to as many customers as possible. Sometimes I think startups will think that they have the perfect product and go out, and there's not product market fit, and there's not an audience for what you think the world needs. And so just talking to as many people as possible about their energy use and what they wanted and what they were willing to pay for clean energy was really telling. And initially, no one was willing to give, 3 college grads LLC that much of responsibility. And so when we were getting our first partnerships with solar developers, they were giving us small chunks of projects. And they were really small, at 200 kilowatts at a time. And we said, okay, we're going to start small. We're going to do a really good job at this small scale and then just slowly grow. And then, the next year went from 200 kilowatts to 2 megawatts at a time. Then it was 6 megawatts at a time. Now it's, bigger portfolios, entire portfolios at a time. And so just knowing to start small and know that and build your systems so that they can scale has been kind of our original theory for how we were going to get started.
And for those that are new to community solar, what is community solar? What is Solstice? Who's the customer?
Yeah, so for the first time in the history of the United States and the world, solar is actually cheap enough that it can help us all save money on our electricity bills. But the issue is that most of us cannot put solar on our home. So the vast majority of Americans, 4 out of 5 Americans, cannot install solar on their home for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're a renter or a condo owner, or there's a tree covering their roof, or their roof is facing the wrong way, or it's made out of the wrong materials, or they can't afford the cost of solar, or don't have the right FICO credit score to get financing. And so when you look at all the reasons why people can't put solar on their home, then you see, wow, this is the reason why so few people actually have solar. And community solar is a solution to this problem. So for the folks that are locked out of rooftop solar, they could buy a portion of a neighborhood shared solar farm. And it's not a microgrid where you're directly plugged into the solar farm. The electricity flows from the farm back to the grid, but people can subscribe to a portion of that power. And they see the benefits show up as a credit on their monthly utility bill. And the subscription part is key because it means that people don't have to pay upfront for the solar. They're just paying for the power that's produced by their share. And generally speaking, in most states, they're paying for this at a guaranteed discount compared to what they would have paid for the utility for that power. So they're not putting anything on their home. They're not paying anything up front, and they're guaranteed a savings. So it's the most affordable and accessible type of solar out there.
So you are saving people money. Your customers are the developers. What is the business model for Solstice? How do you all make money?
Yeah, so there's on one side of the market, in the solar marketplace, you have developers that are building and financing these solar farms, and they're very good at that. And they're very good at putting solar in the ground, getting the land, arranging the capital stack, getting interconnection and permitting. But they have generally been used to selling their power to the utility at the wholesale price. And now they want to do community solar because they get a higher price closer to the retail rate of electricity for their solar farms. But now they have to deal with the prospect of signing up hundreds, if not thousands, of residential customers. And generally speaking, they don't have the software that can manage that whole customer experience, from customer education to customer enrollment and the billing and the crediting of people's bill and the integration with their utility accounts. And so what we do is we take care of every step of that customer experience for solar developers. And we do all of the community organizing and customer education around community solar with, directly to residents and businesses that sign up for solar farms. And we're also doing all of the management of the solar farms with our software, the billing and the crediting of the customer, and the management of the customer experience. And so our obsession is, how do we make solar so easy and so affordable that everyone can do it? And part of the reason why we really own that whole customer experience is because we're intent on making it more inclusive to underserved communities and low to moderate income Americans. So that is what's fueled the founding of Solstice and why we do the work we do.
I know part of making it more accessible, and one of the things that Powerhouse Ventures is most excited about, is your Energy Score product. Energy Score is a more accurate way in predicting utility bill payments and more inclusive of low-income Americans compared to industry standard FICO scores. How does Energy Score work, and what impact is it having with your customers?
Yeah, to understand Energy Score, I just want to make sure everyone understands a couple of things about the FICO credit scores. Like, why do we use FICO credit scores in energy? And so I think most people know that FICO credit scores are your destiny in this country, that they determine whether you get a loan or a car, or sometimes an apartment or a job will check your credit score. And so it's really hard to do anything if you don't have a high credit score. And my mom used to tell us, just because we don't have a high credit score does not mean we're bad people. And she was right. And in solar, you know, your credit score also determines whether you can get access to financing for rooftop solar, and it determines whether you get community solar for a lot of projects. So we thought that was ridiculous because FICO credit scores don't measure a lot of things. They don't measure your utility repayment history, your cell phone payment history, your rental history. All of this isn't measured in FICO. And so you could have a $500,000 mortgage and have a higher FICO score than someone who pays their rental bill on time every month. So FICO is our destiny in this country, but we now have better data science that we don't have to rely on FICO anymore. We can rewrite our destiny using innovation and more accurate data. And so we set out, thanks to a support from the Department of Energy and with our research, our data scientists at MIT and Stanford, we invented something called the Energy Score. And the Energy Score is based on 800,000 lines of consumer data. We did machine learning regressions, and we found that the algorithm is more accurate at predicting utility bill payment behavior than FICO. And it's more inclusive of low to moderate income Americans who would have been locked out of clean energy projects if we were relying on FICO. So you can be more accurate at determining bill payment history, and you can be more inclusive of low to moderate income Americans. We live in a world in which you can be more inclusive and it doesn't have to hurt business. And so that's the world that we're trying to live in, is the world that as it should be.
You've created this vision and built this business to the point of now having 28 people on the Solstice team. Did building a team and building Solstice, did that all come naturally to you? How did you know how to do it?
No, but it didn't come naturally, but and a great lesson when I was working in the White House, and you're lucky enough to witness some of the most talented, credentialed, smart, intelligent people get in a room, and you realize that there's no way they know everything about what they're doing. And honestly, sitting in the Situation Room sometimes, like, it was very clear that people were just figuring it out. And so there's a lot of important things about having the experience to do the job well, but there's a lot of that everyone at the top is figuring it out as they go along too. And so having a comfort with that helped us think outside the box and kind of go beyond just what traditional industries were doing. Is we have to figure out a better way. No one else has done this before. And so there's no roadmap. And that is how we've been able to do weird things like invent the Energy Score, because we just saw a gap and we try to problem solve our way through it. And so no, it hasn't felt natural, but I think what we've learned is that it's all about learning and who learns the fastest. That's successful startups are not the ones that get it right out of the door on the first day. The successful startups are the ones who learn the fastest.
Well said, and very aligned with the values that I know you hold to be true. I've been fortunate to know you for a few years, and for as long as I've known you, you've been really consistent in your values. And I'm curious, how, if at all, has your leadership style changed from starting Solstice at MIT to having a team of 28 people and closing this latest round? Has your leadership style changed?
I realized the other day that a startup is a lot like starting a symphony. So, at first you have to play the role of the composer. You have to think of the music and figure out how to raise money so you can print the music. And and then after that, your role is to actually play the music, because you're inevitably short-staffed, and so you have to learn how to play the violin at the same time as the cello and the bass and the percussion. And then if you're lucky enough to get people to work alongside to do the work, then your job changes and you go from playing the instruments to doing more of the conducting. And the job is actually to let people who are better at playing the instruments than you are, because if you play all of those instruments, you're not going to do any of them well. So you find people who are better, who are masters at their craft, whether it be marketing or operations or sales or engineering, and you empower them to do their job well. And all your job is to kind of guide them to look around the corner and see what's coming up next on the music, and to take their input and hear where there's discord and try to bring harmony to the process. So my job has changed a lot in such a short amount of time. And where I failed as a leader, it's when I didn't realize when I had to jump to the next job. But it's been an incredible journey, and we're all better as a Solstice team. We're all better because we're learning from each other and from people who are really good at their jobs.
Mm. Together, this team that you've built has generated demand for over 100 megawatts of community solar. You also just closed this very successful round despite COVID. What's been your biggest lesson learned so far?
Along those lines, it has been that the sooner you realize that the success of the company depends not on you, but on the people that are doing the work and that you surround yourself with. The sooner you realize that as a founder, the quicker you realize the path towards sustainability. And in terms of other lessons, about the clean energy industry, we've learned a couple of really key things. One is that I thought people would buy clean energy because it was the right thing to do and they wanted to help the environment. And there are a number of people that do that, but there are only 6 million people, 6 million households in America that pay for green power. And given that green power has only really been available at a premium, that kind of tells you how many people in this country are willing to pay more for clean energy. And it's not that many. Out of 130 million households, only 6 million will buy green power. And so the realization has been that we need to make solar easier to buy. We need to make it more accessible. We need to make people realize that everyone around them is doing it too, because people want to do what everyone around them is doing. And we need to make it cheaper for people. We can't just rely on renewable energy being a premium and expecting people to buy it. And then the second biggest lesson is that we don't operate in the currency of money. I mean, technically we do, but truly when we're talking about energy, the currency we're operating in is trust. And we can only move at the speed of trust. And trust is entitled. I mean, not entitled. Trust is earned. And so the biggest problem I think clean energy sometimes has is that there's a deficit of trust in energy between consumers and energy companies. And maybe for good reason. A lot of ESCOs have been sued in class action lawsuits for changing prices on people without telling them. But people don't know how they get their energy. They don't know who to trust in energy. And so the most important thing we do is build trust with communities and earn that trust and hold that trust, because without that, we're doing climate and social equity a disservice, because no one will trust us enough to buy the product.
That trust is fundamental to the continuation and existence of Solstice. And every founder, just about every founder that we've interviewed on What It Takes has been within months or weeks or days or hours of shutting their doors. What's the closest that Solstice has ever come to shutting the doors?
Yeah, a couple years ago, we were about a pay period away from shutting our doors, and it was a choice between figuring out a way to infuse capital and make payroll, and letting people go. And my co-founder and I take that responsibility of employing people very seriously. You know, these are people's livelihoods, and I don't have children yet, but I do. I'm not trying to be paternalistic, but I do think of my team like my family, and I can't. If I can do anything to prevent them from losing their livelihood, I will. And so, my co-founder and I, took loans out, to personal loans, essentially to kind of save the company and float it for a little while till we got other kinds of funding and got revenue in the door. And so it's a little bit ironic because we work on credit scores work, and my own credit score has dropped in the course of this experience, and I'm working to get that back up. But I think, when I look back, it was absolutely worth it, and it was a little bit of temporary pain so that we could continue to do the work that can serve so many more people outside of ourselves. Yeah, of course it's worth it. And so we've come close, but we made it through, and like you said, this past round is evidence that persistence sometimes does pay off.
What's been the single hardest moment?
I would say that COVID has obviously rocked everyone's world, and it's been a roller coaster, as we call our industry, the solar coaster. And what felt worst about COVID was that in April, we saw kind of our revenues go off a cliff in March, because so much of what we do is about community organizing and trying to work with local communities to get access to clean energy and build their wealth. But a lot of that work happens in person. And so when we were no longer able to do that, we saw our revenues go off a cliff. And initially, I was just worried that my team was going to get sick, and we wanted to prevent everyone from getting sick. And then I realized that in order to ensure that Solstice would be around after COVID, I would have to cut our burn rate more than I felt comfortable cutting our burn rate. And so on April 1st of this year, we laid off 10 folks, and it was a really hard day. I don't judge anyone for crying, but I'm not a crier myself. But after that day where we told everyone that we were so sorry that we weren't able to keep their positions, I found myself sobbing to my family and my partner, because I felt terrible about having to do that to people. You work so hard to build an inclusive work environment where people can thrive and where they can be their best self. And the moment they need you the most, you have to let them down. And that killed me. And ultimately, we had to do it. We pivoted. We restructured the company. We changed all of our strategies. And I'm really happy to say that this quarter, the quarter's not over yet, but this quarter is our biggest revenue quarter in the history of Solstice. And it's, 4x what our best quarter previously was. And that's all due to the team. The team really came together and said, okay, we got to come up with creative solutions to this problem. And we have to figure out a way to keep doing the work, because the work's too important. And they did. And so to have gone through that really, and feel like I failed my team, and to have the team come through with creative solutions to COVID has been incredible to see and to work alongside.
As a woman of color who, as you talked about earlier, was raised by a single immigrant mother, on a working class salary, what advice would you give to founders who do not see themselves represented in our industry?
It's a real problem. I mean, it's not just, I don't know if people know this, but 22% of the energy industry are women. And renewable energy is, you think would be much better because but it's not. It's about 25% of the energy, I mean, the clean energy industry is women. And then numbers for BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color aren't even tracked because I'm pretty sure it's very low. And it used to be that when we went to an energy conference, they may have had a panel on social equity, and it would be in a really small room to the side of the conference, never the main stage. And I have been incredibly blown away by the past few months in which I have never heard more people talk about social equity and racial justice in energy and in climate than in the past few months. And this reckoning has been really hard for people in the past few months. It's been really raw for people, but it's given me a lot of hope that change can come quicker than we think. And so if you don't see someone who looks like you in the industry you want to work in, take it from a tiny Asian woman who worked in national security at the White House and now in energy, that you just have to just believe that that future can come more quickly than you think and work towards the future. Have faith that it will come.
We're going to close with our high voltage round. These are quick questions, 1 or 2 word answers, starting with, if you were an animal, what animal would you be and why?
I love pollinators because they bring, pollen to different kinds of plants and animals. So, and I would go with hummingbird because they eat twice their weight in food.
Amazing. If you had to start a new career tomorrow, what would it be?
I'd love to be a photographer. It's one of my passions in life.
When have you failed?
I think if you don't fail in this job, you're probably not ambitious enough. And so I do truly fail every day, and I don't feel good about it because I feel like every day I let someone down. And particularly when I have failed is we live at the nexus of 2 worlds. One is the market-driven world of solar developers and financiers who are building new projects, and ultimately they have a responsibility to make their projects pencil out for their capital providers. And on the other hand, we work for the activist world, the environmental justice and climate justice world, who is right when they say that the energy industry as it is does not support our shared values of justice and equity. And so if you're working with both worlds and you're in the middle of them, you're generally going to be unsatisfactory to either one or both at any given moment. We can always do better on equity, and we should hold ourselves to that standard and always keep pushing the bar on that. And we should also figure out a way to make the market include more low income and Black and Indigenous and Latinx folks that have been locked out of the market. But doing those 2 things at the same time, climate change mitigation and racial justice or poverty alleviation, generally means that we're failing someone at any given moment.
What is something that you thought was true that you no longer believe?
I used to think that inequities existed because of a lack of political will. I thought it was that simple. And then I worked in India, and I worked in areas of the country that I think ordinary Indians don't even go to. They're so rural and out of the way. So I would take a plane, then get on a train overnight, and then I'd get in a car for 5 hours to visit a village that didn't have access to electricity. And I realized that it's not just political will, that you have to invent new systems to get people more access. So you have to figure out how to get distribution right to deliver to the last mile. You have to figure out how to allow people to finance their purchases. You can't just invent the solar lantern. You have to invent the ecosystem that changes systems that give people access to this stuff.
Mm. What is your worst trait?
I'm well, I'm gonna give you two. I'm impatient. I have a tendency towards all or nothing behaviors, and so the all side of things can be very intense for people, and it's more conducive to an environment like the White House or like a political campaign rather than a startup that allows everyone work-life balance. But I mean, that's something we do pride ourselves on, and giving a lot of people flexibility at Solstice, but it was a journey for me to get to a more relaxed state about work.
I'm happy about that for you. If there was just one or two people who were going to hear this podcast, who would you want them to be?
I mean, my joke answer is Mark Ruffalo, because I really want to meet him, because I think we would share values.
You definitely share values. We can help.
But my real answer is my grandma. So my grandma was a entrepreneur in, mid 20th century South Korea. And she had to do it out of necessity because my grandfather didn't earn enough money to support their whole family. And she had 5 children and also ran a business. And she was mocked mercilessly for running a business as a woman in post-Korean War Korea, because it meant that she was failing as a mother. She was just supposed to mother. And she was a social failure for starting a business. And so I'd love for her to see you do what you do at Powerhouse, and I'd love for her to see what we do at Solstice and realize that the future she always dreamed about is coming. It's not quite here, but it's coming.
What is your best quality?
I think it's my delusional optimism. or the fact that in every moment, no matter how bad it gets, no matter the struggles in the very moment or the pain, I am always really grateful for what I have. It's like I've always really thankful, and it sounds so Pollyanna, but it's a good positive force.
Finish these sentences for me. Companies fail because
they don't empower the right leaders at the right time.
If you really knew me, you would know.
I used to DJ on 90s hip hop. And
what? Steph, you've been holding out on me.
Under the name DJ B.I.G. Spoon, in homage to Notorious B.I.G. And I really wish I could DJ again.
That's amazing. If I Google this, will I find any videos or SoundCloud?
Oh, no, just like the people in my grad school will know that.
Okay, I love it. DJ Big Spoon coming to you live. Success is creating a world where everyone can get solar power and clean energy, regardless of their income, regardless of the type of roof they have, or any other marker of privilege. If I could have done one thing differently, if I could have done one thing differently, I think I would have built a business closer to home and my family. I see them very seldom. My mom and my sister and my brother all live in Hawaii still, and I feel like I could be a better family member to them by being more present. If the world knew me for one thing, it would be
that I think my purpose in life is to build communities and organizations that create access to opportunities that I've been fortunate to have, but others don't.
I'm most proud of
my brother. I haven't gone to really talk about him. He deals with a debilitating, really painful medical illness, and he every day lives with pain, and he's still the most generous human that I've ever met in my entire life. He's so thoughtful. He always puts other people in front of him. And I once had a bad toothache and it put me in a terrible mood for a whole week. And I realized that, he lives with so much pain, and to be able to be that generous is a mark of strength. And he's the strongest person I know. So definitely my brother.
Last question, to build a successful company, what it takes is?
A willingness to live in your stretch zone, delusional optimism, and an incredible team working together.
Steph, this has been so amazing. I feel so fortunate to know you and now to have the opportunity to support Solstice. Thank you for joining us on What It Takes. Thank you for sharing your journey, and just very grateful for you and what you bring into the world.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.